We're here today with Valerie Hannon, and it's great to have you, Valerie. Thank you for being part of the conversations. Valerie is currently near the Peak District in the UK, and I'm here in Sydney. Daytime for Valerie, nighttime for me. It's great to have you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Stephen. Lovely to be here. Lovely to see you.
So we've been thrown into this world of sudden change, and I guess we've now had a few weeks to even get to observe and to start thinking through what's actually happened. What are the directions? What are some of your immediate observations about the responses to this emergency that's just rippled around the world? Love to hear that.
Yeah, and they really are immediate observations, Stephen, because we're very much in the foothills of all of this, I think. So I've just been trying to listen a lot and observe, tune in to what people are saying is happening in their contexts. And I guess my overall impression is one of huge variation, not just between the rich and the poor worlds, the global north, global south, although those are immense. And of course, you with your deep connections into Rwanda will be profoundly aware of them. And what is going on in India is profoundly disturbing and concerning. But within rich nations as well, I think there's a huge variation, and so it's incredibly difficult to generalize. I think you're seeing a continuum, really, between, on the one hand, people just being thrown into, we're all in emergency remote teaching as opposed to genuinely online learning, I think, at the moment, because this was unplanned, sudden, and some organizations find themselves in much stronger positions because their own approach to hybrid forms of learning, to conferring and enabling, I should say, rather than conferring, enabling greater levels of learner agency and utilization of multiple resources, has them really very well placed for this emergency. Others are well away from that position. So it seems to me you see a continuum between, frankly, almost nothing happening, and I'm talking in the UK and in the States, I mean, very little happening for learners, to homework writ large, just, stuff being sent through email and worksheets being transmitted, all subject-based, trying to keep up with a set curriculum and a kind of stress about how we're going to cover it with this gap. Or a replication of classrooms, teachers still in transmission mode and using the tools. So that's one end of the curriculum, of the continuum. And then at the other end, some really, really interesting developments. So as I've already said, I think that organizations who have already become hybrid, who'd been flipping the system, flipping the classrooms, who had embraced great technology tools, who had enabled learner agency, are really far better placed. So you're seeing, firstly, I think, a sensitive attention to learner needs. Everybody is under great stress. They really are. I want to come on in a minute to the big picture in which we have to see all this. Learning isn't happening in a bubble. It's happening in some very, very difficult conditions for many people. That's teachers, parents, and learners. So I think I'm seeing some teachers showing incredible sensitivity to that, doing check-ins with families, talking to families about the context, getting to understand where they're at, advising on some good learning goals, and giving some stimulating challenges which are appropriate to context. So I think that level of sort of personalization through the medium of Zoom or whatever it is starting to become increasingly sophisticated. I think that the curation of online resources is something that teachers are starting to get really smart about. They themselves, as I already said, been thrown in the deep end, many of them. They might have utilized them in the past, but this is, a kind of emergency, not exactly just in time situation. And moving on then to some really sophisticated projects, to people prototyping what they're doing and iterating and going on to the next move, and utilizing the situation in ways which are profoundly, I think, inspirational. And I think that you can kind of conceptualize that variation, particularly on the lines of how well held the schools and the teachers feel, as well as being challenged. So that by what that I mean that in systems or microsystems where there's some level of system level coordination, where teachers themselves are being supported to think about this carefully, to do some collective and collaborative planning together, to be informed by others about what's great out there, rather than having to do the whole damn thing themselves from scratch. You know, where that level of coordination, it might be a Learnlife network, or it might be a district. But, you know, I think there are many schools in the UK, because of the more or less destruction of certainly local authorities as holding organisations. There are some who are in federations who are getting that kind of support, but that can make a huge difference. I was listening to one of the CPD leaders in Ontario the other day, and talking about what they're doing. So where you've got a district who can hold people, who can provide support, who can offer additional assistance around, say, for example, the curation of online resources, I think that makes a big difference. But of course, you know, it comes down to, in the end, how teachers respond to this. And I would just say some are in a much stronger position than others. One of the things I'm pretty clear about, it's very hard to make predictions about all of this, but I think what we can say without a shadow of a doubt is that it is going to lead to a huge increase in inequity.
Yes.
And where and I don't just mean between the Rwandas of this world and the rich North, but within rich systems, people are being thrown back on the resources of their families and the qualities of the teachers who they come. And of course, richer families tend to be in schools which are doing better and which have better staff, often, not always by any means, but they can attract staff with certain kinds of skills. And the resources of the family are huge in this circumstance. So the inequity, I think, is if it was a gap before, it's going to be a chasm. And I think when we go back into our institutions, it's going to be a real need to think not about driving people to catch up, but to think about what that inequity has entailed. So for me, that's one of the absolutely certain outcomes of this pandemic. I'll pause there.
Yeah, that's right. Now, well, it seems to me that the emergency has suddenly exposed every level, from governments through to local areas through to schools, that have failed to even have dialogues around this type of situation at all. You know, I mean, obviously, there's been challenges in terms of governments that have either put money or not put money into the health systems, but the fact that we can now see almost immediately which education systems have just never discussed anything to do with blended learning, or I guess the strategies that you've just mentioned that are occurring in some places are enabling some districts and some schools to at least move on, even they might actually be thriving, but at least they're moving forward, even in a short space of time. I'm also finding it interesting. One observation I've had, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this one, is that for the first time I've heard teachers recognise that the grading systems are totally inequitable. You know, that take the emergency aside, they've never really thought about, if you've got 30 kids in a class and you're giving them all the same test, some of those kids came from a home last night where it was completely dysfunctional. Other kids came from a home which was completely functional. And for the first time, I'm actually hearing teachers recognise the inequity in the grading systems. I would be interested to hear whether you've heard anything along those lines.
Yes, very definitely. I mean, I think the term exposing is a pretty good one. It is bringing the reality of kids' home lives, which for many schools that's kind of put in a box. And there's a sense in which you understand that. You want to say, we're taking, the school is a different space altogether. You don't have to bring all that stuff with you. You can be you. And I sort of get that, but that is the reality of their lives. And as you say, one of the other outcomes, again, across the developed world, is a huge increase in domestic violence.
Yes.
Which is an underlying drumbeat anyway for many kids. As you say, they're in a context where that is going on, let alone having a quiet space to work and the right online tools just that they can use exclusively. compared to a kid who've got helicopter parents who are hovering to help and bring in all kinds of other resources, only too happy to make it a rich learning experience. I mean, what is that? This notion of fairness in standardized testing is a joke. But I want to just pick up, I mean, I'm sure we'll come back to assessment and testing, one of which is very important, one of which is not, by the way. Assessment is really, really significant in this. I want to come back to that later, but I do want to say a little bit about one. I say I've been listening a lot, and I was watching with care the news item when kids in the UK were told, bye-bye, you're not coming back, we're closing. And it was an interesting sort of news item. They honed in on one school in Greater Manchester, big school. And as you know, I have written a great deal about purpose. I think our lack of discussion has been exposed about what the purpose of schools is. And I was seized by this because this head teacher, really formidable woman, obviously, hugely devoted to school. She was saying, this is heartbreaking to see the kids go off in this way. And I know it matters so much because purpose is so fundamental. And I'm thinking, yes, fantastic. She said, they've all been working so hard with a real, quality of purpose. I think it's fantastic. And now that's taken away from them. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really interesting. And she said, because the whole purpose is to get their GCSEs. And now it's been taken away from them.
Yeah. I mean, it's that again. It's another. We're having the values exposed, aren't we? I mean, that's what's going on. And I mean, it's both encouraging and frightening. Yeah.